In the sea of buy low and sell high quotes from the elite investors of our time, we've come to realize that most of the advice they give is often generic. And that's why it was so refreshing to come across one of the all-time quotes from Charlie Munger. In a Berkshire shareholder meeting back in the 1990s, Mr. Munger was once asked by a young man about the greatest advice he could possibly give in wealth creation. In response, the legendary investor said this: "The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you gotta do it. I don't care what you have to do. Find a way to get your hands on $100,000. After that, you can ease off the gas a little bit." But why? What's the logic behind his advice? And why is the $100,000 benchmark so important? Listen, have you ever seen a snowball fall from the top of a cliff? As it goes down, it gets bigger, faster, and more aggressive. And it's exactly like that when it comes to money. Once you've got that first $100,000 locked down, you can really afford to ease off the gas a little bit, as Charlie Munger suggested. In today's video, we'll be breaking down everything you need to know about why your net worth completely explodes after your first $100,000 into super easy sections, while projecting how long it'll take you to be a millionaire after that first 100K. Speaking of the Grail figure, you might want to stick around to the end of this video, as we'll be showing you the fastest ways to make $100,000. Spoiler alert, it's way easier than you think. But before we go into the order of the day, allow us to reiterate the fact that Charlie Munger was not telling anyone to dip their hands into anything illegal. When he said he didn't care what you had to do to get your first $100,000, he was only referring to the countless investment methods out there, jobs, and basically any clean income generating avenue that you could possibly think about. Understood? Alright then, without further ado, let's begin our journey, starting with the two foundations that make the first $100,000 so special. For the sake of it, let's call the first method money works the hardest, because the entirety of its DNA centers around that phase. But basically, what this is saying is that as you have more capital, the benefits or returns you get from it also increase in proportion. For example, let us assume that our imaginary investor pal named Peter was to invest $200 in stocks or another investment, which comes with some risk, of course. But let's say he was able to make a 10% return by the end of the year. That means Peter will have earned an extra $20, making it a total of $220. Granted, it's not a huge amount, but if Peter were to take things up a notch by investing $200,000, do you know how much he'll make with that same 10% return? That would be $220,000. Despite taking on the same risk in both scenarios, the outcomes vary greatly because of the difference in initial capital. The second foundation that we have to talk about, however, is excreted money accumulation, which, as you might have already figured out, centers on the snowball philosophy that we briefly touched on earlier.
Of a very large hill with wet snow and starting with a snowball and getting it rolling downhill.
So let's assume that Peter saves $10,000 a year and that he was able to get an 8% return on his investment in the stock market. Saving up to that first $100,000 in this case would take him about 7.27 years if he were to save $10,000 each year and invest it. There's a common misconception that saving $1 million would take 7.27 years times 10, given how 100K multiplied by 10 is a million. But that's really not the case at all. In reality, it takes much less time than 72 years to reach $1 million. Let's break it down by looking at how long it takes to get to $200,000 instead. With an 8% return on investment, after reaching $100,000, getting to $200,000 would only take Peter around 4.94 years, because now his initial $100,000 is generating interest, and he's still contributing $10,000 every year. Now fast forward to $500,000, and he will have gotten that in about 11 years. By applying this foundation to $100,000 with an 8% return on investment. So, to recap, let's take a look at how long it takes to get to each $100,000 for the first half of $1 million. As we said earlier, the first $100,000 would take roughly 7.27 years to reach an 8% return. The second $100,000 milestone would take about 4.94 years. Then, the third milestone would take approximately 3.68 years due to the compounding effect continuing. Then the fourth milestone would only take about 2.93 years to reach. But make no mistake, each subsequent $100,000 milestone will be achieved faster than the prior one. For instance, the fifth $100,000 will only take about 2.45 years. And if it pleases you, did you know that if Peter kept on reinvesting that money, it would take him only 29.9 years to become a millionaire from his initial investment of $10,000? That's amazing when you consider it's a fraction of the widely believed 72 years. We guess that's why Charlie Munger's all-time business partner, Warren Buffett, once admitted that his life has been a product of compound interest. So hopefully, this demonstrates how your net worth grows significantly once you reach $100,000. And even more crucially, it shows you that if we can get to $100,000 faster than 7.84 years, then we're going to have so much more time for a lot of wealth accumulation. Nevertheless, the main challenge when it comes to accumulating wealth through compounding lies in the initial phase, particularly in reaching the first $100,000. And that's the exact reason why Charlie Munger made the ultimate rule to warn us all. In his words, he said that the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. But sadly, this is one of the biggest problems that we see going on with most investors, and people in general in this generation right now. We're surrounded by instant gratification in today's world, and often we don't consider the consequences of our spending before we make purchases. Sadly, many individuals who haven't yet reached close to $100,000 in net worth tend to spend all the money they have because they prefer living in the moment, feeling they can't afford to save. While we will definitely agree that you should try to relax and enjoy your life in the best way possible, it's pivotal to note that you have to be prudent about it, especially given the fact that inflation was a thing last year and that the average cost of living is still incredibly expensive. Knowing what you know now about how important the first $100,000 is to hit, don't you think you need to reduce the way you spend impulsively on the latest clothes, gadgets, or even hundreds of dollars a month on car payments for your second car, when the one you already had was good enough? Charlie Munger was already a wealthy man by the time he joined Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway, and he went on to grow his fortune to an estimated $2.3 billion by early 2023. Every year, during Berkshire's shareholder meeting, Munger would sit next to Buffett, entertaining both the audience and the Berkshire chairman with his wisdom. He hardly ever shied away from giving the quality advice on excessive spending. He once said that we need to live within our income and save so that you can invest. But while the idea of living within your means isn't new, it's still one of the best and most trusted pieces of advice for anyone looking to build wealth. Allocating yourself a surplus at the end of each month, even if it's just a modest amount, to invest in accounts enables your money to compound over decades. So before you hit $100,000 in net worth, you have to realize that every single dollar is so much more important, especially in the beginning. Lest we forget though, did you know that the key to getting your first $100,000 doesn't solely lie in investment returns in the market? If you save $10,000 a year for 7 years, and were able to attain a relatively modest 5% return on your savings, you would have $85,491 after the end of those 7 years. But 82% of that would have been savings, with the other 18% being from your investment returns. If we switch things up a bit by saving up to $15,000 per year with an average return of 10%, in 10 years, you will have made $262,968. with 57% coming from your savings and 43% from your returns. So, as you can see, you will have made your first $100,000 from investment gains alone. In a nutshell, it all just boils down to being smart with your money and being more frugal while trying to increase your income as you go. But this brings us to the next crucial part of today's video: how we can make our first $100,000 in a jiffy. Guys, to make things smoother and more comfortable, we're going to break it all into 3 easy pathways that, when all practiced together, will give you that much desired 6-figure sum in no time at all. So the first pathway that we'll have to talk about is to massively attack your earnings. You see, regardless of your current income level, your primary focus should be on actively building wealth. And by this, we mean to aggressively improve or boost what you make every day, week, month, or whatever metric you desire to use. This is where you need to take your self-investments more seriously by either gaining extra skills, knowledge, or certificates to give you better leverage. Also, you can try snooping around job openings in search of better pay if and when the opportunity presents itself. Or hey, invest your money in stocks, real estate, or any other type of business. You can even put money aside to start up a side hustle that can passively keep your money up without you moving a muscle. The world is your oyster. But in any case, you need to increase your source of income if you want to go from $0 to $100,000 as soon as possible. And this brings us to the next pathway, which is to protect your earnings. This pathway is crucial to emphasize because even as you work on growing your income streams, you still need to manage your expenses wisely to ensure that your earnings aren't frivolously spent. Without prudent financial management, saving up to $100,000 or achieving any significant financial goal will either become challenging or impossible because you'll keep getting drawn into the instant gratification of today's world. A compelling example of this approach is Charlie Munger, whose frugal lifestyle exemplifies the concept of defending his dollars. You see, Munger was widely known for living below his means. Just like Warren Buffett, he avoided flashy expenditures and maintained a modest lifestyle. This disciplined approach to financial management illustrates how controlling expenses can contribute significantly to long-term financial success, as by prioritizing savings and investing wisely, he was able to steadily accumulate wealth over time. From today on, start making budgets, cut back on some discretionary spending in areas that you don't need, and figure out how to only spend from your emergency savings. But while you're at that, path number 3 is all about smart money. And by this, we mean making your money work for you. Living in any Western country, you're probably aware that the government takes a chunk of your pay. In some places, that could be as high as 50%. But in America, the highest federal tax bracket rate is around 37%. So, one easy method to accumulate and retain more of your money is by using tax-sheltered accounts such as the Roth IRA, traditional IRA, or 401k plans, as these options provide opportunities to save and invest without being heavily taxed. In a Roth IRA, your earnings grow tax-free. With a traditional IRA, you get a tax deduction on your contributions for the year. And with a 401k, you can receive employer-matched contributions, providing you with some free money along with tax benefits. By maximizing your dollars in this manner, you're essentially creating a tax shelter, shielding your money from the government's 37% tax rate. This accelerates your wealth accumulation, especially given the fact that most of the challenge lies in the initial stages. So, the sooner we overcome that hurdle, the better off we'll be. Another juicy way to make our money work for us is by opening a high-yield savings account and putting our money into it. Make no mistake, guys, there's hardly any benefit to putting your cash in a traditional checking account at a big bank, where you'll only be earning a paltry interest rate. It's simply not worth it. With high-yield savings accounts offering rates as high as 5 to 7% or even higher, there are better ways to have your idle cash work for you.